In the village of Umo, a womb that refuses to swell becomes a grave where a marriage is buried alive. We meet Agatha on the day of the naming ceremony for her neighbor's fifth child. The courtyard explodes with color, crimson wrappers twirl, palm wine flows, and the talking drums pulse like a second heartbeat. But for Agatha, the celebration sounds like an accusation. She stands at the edge of the gathering, her hands folded protectively over her flat belly, while her mother-in-law's voice cuts through the music like a machete through sugarcane. 10 years, and still nothing to show. The intro establishes her exile within her own community and the crushing weight of the village's expectations, the unspoken contract that would drive her toward the forest and the forbidden choice waiting at the shrine. That night, Agatha scraped the burnt bottom of her soup pot while Obaina sat silent in the corner, his face turned toward the wall. The celebration had ended hours ago, but the shame lingered like smoke in her chest. "Your mother came to see me today," she said quietly. Obaina didn't answer. "She said if I don't give you a child by the next harvest, she will find you a second wife herself." He stood then, his shadow stretching across the clay floor. "Agatha, I have never asked you for this. But you've never stopped her either." The silence that followed felt heavier than any argument. Obaina left the hut without another word, and Agatha sat alone with her hands pressed against her empty belly, listening to the distant laughter of mothers singing their children to sleep. The next morning, Mama Favor appeared at her doorway, arms folded across her chest like a sentinel. "I saw you yesterday," she said, her voice dripping with pity that felt more like poison. "Standing there like a ghost at your own funeral. Tell me, Agatha, how much longer will you make that poor man suffer?" Agatha's fingers tightened around the mortar she was holding. "I am his wife. A wife gives her husband sons. You give him only silence and empty rooms." When Mama Favor finally left, Agatha walked to the back of her compound and stared at the edge of the forbidden forest. The trees stood like sentries in the distance, dark and watchful. Somewhere in her chest, a terrible seed began to grow, not of life, but of desperation. She would do whatever it took. Even if it meant becoming someone she didn't recognize. The deception began with a single piece of cloth. Agatha folded it carefully, pressed it against her stomach, then wrapped her outer wrapper tight enough to hold the shape. She studied herself in the cracked mirror by the window, turning side to side. It was subtle. Believable. When Obaina came home that evening, she served him dinner with her back slightly arched, one hand resting on her lower belly. He noticed. His eyes flickered downward, then back to her face, but he said nothing. Not yet. By the third month, the whispers had started. "Have you seen Agatha? I think she's finally carrying." Mama Favor squinted at her during the village market, suspicion and hope tangled in her expression. Agatha kept her wrapper loose, her movements careful, her excuses ready. She avoided her husband's touch at night, citing fatigue, nausea, the fragility of early pregnancy. "Let me feel," Obaina said one night, reaching for her. She turned away. The midwife said I must be gentle. "No pressure. Please." He withdrew his hand, and the lie settled between them like a third presence in the room. By the 7th month, Agatha had stopped sleeping. The weight of the padding had become unbearable, not physically, but spiritually. She carried it like a curse, adjusting it in the dark, adding more cloth as the months passed, watching her reflection become a stranger. Her mother-in-law visited often now, her face softened by anticipation. "I knew you had it in you," she said, placing her hand on Agatha's fabricated belly. Agatha smiled, but inside, her heart was screaming. The 9th month arrived like a sentencing. And Agatha realized, with cold terror, that she had no plan for what came next. The contractions were supposed to start. The baby was supposed to come. But there was no baby. Agatha lay awake in the dark, her hands trembling against the cloth padding beneath her wrapper. Obaina slept beside her, his breathing deep and trusting. Outside, the village was silent. Waiting. She couldn't wait any longer. Before dawn, Agatha slipped from the hut and walked toward the forest. The forbidden path was overgrown, tangled with vines that seemed to reach for her ankles. No one came here. Not unless they were desperate or damned. The deeper she went, the quieter the world became. No birds. No insects. Just the sound of her own breathing and the whisper of leaves that sounded almost like voices. Then she saw it, the shrine of the forgotten. It sat in a clearing bathed in silver moonlight, surrounded by carved wooden figures with hollow eyes. Offerings lay scattered at the base, cowrie shells, kola nuts, blackened coins. And there, wrapped in white cloth at the center of the shrine, was a baby. Agatha froze. The child didn't cry. Didn't move. But its eyes were open, staring directly at her. She stepped closer, her heart pounding so hard it hurt. This was a spirit child. A sacrifice. An offering to the gods. Taking it would be. The baby blinked. Agatha's hands moved before her mind could stop them. She lifted the child from the shrine, clutching it against her chest. The infant was warm. Real. Alive. And as she turned to leave, the wind picked up, howling through the trees like a warning she chose not to hear. Agatha ran until her lungs burned, the baby pressed tight against her chest. She stopped at the edge of the forest, her mind racing. She needed proof. Evidence. A story that would silence every question. She found a cluster of giant snails clinging to a wet stone and crushed them with a rock, smearing the thick, translucent fluid across her thighs and wrapper. She tore a strip of cloth, dotted her hands, mossed her hair. Then she let out a scream, raw and guttural, the kind a woman in labor might make. She stumbled into the village just as the sun broke over the horizon, the baby cradled in her arms, her wrapper stained and her face streaked with sweat. Help. Someone help me. Mama Favor was the first to reach her, eyes wide with shock. Agatha. What happened? I went to gather firewood, Agatha gasped, her voice shaking. The pains came so fast. I couldn't make it back. I gave birth alone, by the river. The light came so easily it frightened her. The women swarmed around her, their voices a mixture of awe and concern. They carried her home, cleaned her, praised her strength. Obaina wept when he saw the child, pressing his forehead to Agatha's and whispering, "You've given me everything." Agatha named the baby Prince, a name that meant gift. And for a moment, as the village celebrated and her mother-in-law danced in the courtyard, Agatha almost believed her own story. But that night, as she lay beside the sleeping infant, she saw the baby's eyes flash open in the dark, and for just a second, they glowed like embers. Prince grew quickly. Too quickly. By her first year, she could walk with the balance of a child twice her age. By her second, she spoke in full sentences, her voice soft and oddly formal. But there were things about her that made the other children step back. She never cried. Not once. She had conversations with empty corners of the room, tilting her head as if listening to someone Agatha couldn't see. And on sunny days, when the other children ran through the courtyard casting long shadows on the ground, Prince moved through the light like a ghost, leaving nothing behind. "Mama, why doesn't she play like the others?" one of the neighbor's children asked. Agatha had no answer. Obaina adored Prince. He carved toys for her, sang her songs, carried her on his shoulders through the village. He saw none of the strangeness, only the miracle. But Agatha saw everything. And the weight of it was crushing her. One evening, as Agatha prepared dinner, Prince stood in the doorway, watching her with those two old eyes. "Mama," she said quietly, "do you ever hear them?" Agatha's hands stilled. "Hear who?" "The ones who are waiting." A chill ran down Agatha's spine. "Waiting for what?" Prince smiled, a small, knowing smile that didn't belong on a child's face. "For you to remember. That night, Agatha couldn't sleep. She lay beside Obaina, listening to Prince's steady breathing from the corner of the room, and wondered what she had truly brought home from that shrine. And whether it had ever been hers to take. If you felt the weight of a secret that changes everything, you already know, some choices don't just shape our lives. They reshape our souls. Stay with this story. There's more to uncover. It happened on a day thick with heat, the kind that made the air shimmer and the chickens too tired to scratch. Mama Favor had come to visit, bringing roasted groundnuts and her usual stream of advice. She found Prince in the back courtyard, sitting perfectly still beneath the shade of the Iroko tree. And coiled around the child's small shoulders, its scales gleaming like polished bronze, was a royal python. Mama Favor's scream shattered the afternoon. Agatha ran outside, her heart in her throat, and froze. The python's head rested against Prince's cheek like a lover's caress. The child wasn't afraid. She was smiling. "Prince, don't move," Agatha whispered, her voice trembling. But Prince only turned to look at her, eyes calm. "It won't hurt me, Mama. It knows me." The python's tongue flicked out, tasting the air, then it slowly unwound itself and slithered away into the tall grass, disappearing like smoke. Mama Favor clutched her chest, her face pale. "That child is not natural, Agatha. Royal pythons don't come to children. They are sacred." "They are," she stopped, her eyes narrowing. "Where did you say you found her again?" Agatha's mouth went dry. "I gave birth to her. You know this." "Do I?" Mama Favor's voice was ice. By evening, the story had spread through Umo like wildfire. The women whispered at the well. The men muttered in low voices outside the meeting house. Prince, the miracle child. Prince, who talked to shadows. Prince, who commanded serpents. Obaina dismissed it all. "They're jealous," he said, pulling Agatha close. "They've always been jealous." But Agatha knew better. The village was watching now. And once a village started watching, it never looked away. The curse came quietly, like rot spreading through fruit. First, it was the goats. Agatha woke one morning to find them lying stiff in the pen, their eyes open and glassy, no visible wounds. Obaina buried them in silence, his jaw tight. Then the yam crops withered. Agatha had planted them herself, tended them carefully, but when she dug into the soil, the tubers came up black and soft, oozing a foul-smelling liquid. Every single one. Meanwhile, Mama Favor's harvest was abundant. The neighbors' goats multiplied. The rest of Umu thrived while Agatha's household crumbled. "It's the child," Mama Favor said openly now, no longer hiding her suspicion behind politeness. "She's brought something into this village. Something dark." Obaina defended his daughter fiercely, but even he couldn't ignore the way their fortunes had turned. He grew thin. Tired. The light in his eyes began to dim. Prince, meanwhile, seemed untouched by it all. She sat in the courtyard, braiding grass into intricate patterns, humming songs in a language Agatha didn't recognize. One night, Agatha couldn't take it anymore. She knelt beside Prince and whispered, "What are you?" Prince looked up, her small face soaring. "I am what you asked for, Mama." "I didn't ask for this." "You asked for a child. You took me from the shrine. You chose." Prince's voice was gentle, but there was something ancient in it. "The lender is asking for his debt." Agatha's blood turned to ice. "What debt?" Prince smiled, and for the first time, it looked sad. "Everything stolen must be returned. Or something else must be given in its place." That night, the wind howled through Umo like the cry of something wounded, and Agatha knew, deep in her bones, that the gods were no longer patient. He arrived at dusk, when the sky had turned the color of a bruise. Baba Ade, the great spiritualist, walked into Umu with his staff in one hand and a calabash in the other, his white robes billowing like a storm cloud. The villagers parted for him, their faces a mixture of reverence and fear. He stopped in front of Agatha's compound, planted his staff in the ground, and the earth seemed to tremble. "There is a thief in this house," he said, his voice booming across the courtyard. Agatha stood frozen, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. Obaina stepped forward, his face pale but defiant. "We have stolen nothing." Baba Aid's eyes, clouded with age but sharp as a blade, turned to Prince, who stood silent in the doorway. The old priest tilted his head, as if listening to something no one else could hear, then nodded slowly. "This child," he said, pointing his staff at Prince, "is Ogumiri. A spirit child, dedicated to the gods before birth. She was left at the shrine of the forgotten as an offering." His gaze shifted to Agatha, and she felt the weight of it like a stone on her chest. "And you took her?" The crowd gasped. Mama Favor's face twisted in vindication. Obaina turned to Agatha, his expression crumbling. "Tell him it's not true." Agatha opened her mouth, but no words came. Baba Adi struck his staff against the ground 3 times. "The gods are merciful, but they are not mocked. Return the child to the shrine by midnight, or the debt will be paid in blood." He looked at Obaina. "Your blood." The priest turned and walked away, leaving Agatha standing in the ruins of her life, surrounded by the accusing eyes of the village. And for the first time in 7 years, she told the truth. The confession shattered everything. Obaina said nothing. He simply stared at her, his face a mask of devastation, then turned and walked into their hut. Agatha followed, desperation clawing at her throat. "I did it for us," she whispered. "I couldn't lose you." "You already have," he said quietly, and the emptiness in his voice was worse than any anger. By nightfall, Obaina had collapsed, his body burning with fever. His breathing came in shallow gasps, his skin slick with sweat. Baba Aid's words echoed in Agatha's mind, "Your blood." There was no choice left. Agatha wrapped Prince in a cloth and carried her toward the forest, her arms trembling. The child was silent, her small hand resting against Agatha's chest. The path felt longer this time, darker, as if the forest itself was resisting her. When they reached the shrine, the carved figures seemed to watch with hollow, accusing eyes. Agatha knelt and placed Prince gently on the stone altar. The child looked up at her, no fear in her gaze, only a strange, sad understanding. "I'm sorry," Agatha whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry." Prince reached up and touched Agatha's cheek. "You loved me, Mama." That was real. The words broke something inside Agatha. She sobbed, clutching the child one last time, memorizing the weight of her, the warmth, the impossible truth that she had loved this stolen gift with every broken piece of her heart. Then she stepped back. The wind rose, swirling around the shrine, and Prince's eyes began to glow. Her small body shimmered, becoming translucent, fading like mist in the morning sun. "Thank you," Prince whispered, her voice already distant. "The lender has his debt." And then she was gone. Agatha collapsed, her scream swallowed by the forest, and the night closed around her like a fist. If there's a moment when you've had to let go of something you loved, even when it was never truly yours, you know this pain. Some losses carve us open. Some reshape us entirely. Hold on. The story isn't finished. Agatha returned to the village alone, her arms empty, her heart a wound that would not close. Obaina survived. The fever broke before dawn, and he woke weak but alive. But when he looked at Agatha, there was a distance in his eyes that had never been there before. They lived in the same house, shared the same meals, but they were strangers now. The village did not forgive her. Mama Favor made sure of that. Agatha became a ghost in Umu, spoken of in whispers, avoided at the market, marked as the woman who had defied the gods. And she accepted it. The shame. The isolation. The silence. For 3 years, she lived in quiet penance, tending her withered garden, speaking to no one. She visited the shrine every full moon, leaving offerings of kola nuts and palm wine, whispering apologies to the wind. And then, impossibly, something shifted. Her body began to change. The nausea. The tenderness. The missed cycle. Agatha didn't dare believe it. But when the midwife confirmed what her body already knew, she wept, not with joy, but with terror. The pregnancy was real this time. Undeniable. Natural. When the baby came, it was a long, brutal labor, but when Agatha finally held her daughter, flesh of her flesh, blood of her blood, she looked into the infant's eyes and froze. There was something familiar there. A flash of recognition. A warmth that felt like forgiveness. The baby's eyes were the same deep brown as Prince's had been. Agatha gasped, tears spilling down her face, and in that moment, she understood. The gods had not forgotten her. They had not abandoned her. They had taken what was theirs and, in their mercy, given her what she had truly asked for all along. A child. Her own. A gift, not stolen, but earned through suffering and repentance. Obaina entered the room, and when he saw the baby, his face softened for the first time in years. He touched the infant's tiny hand, and a tear rolled down his cheek. "What will you name her?" he asked quietly. Agatha looked down at her daughter, at the miracle cradled in her arms, and smiled through her tears. "Mercy," she whispered. "Her name is Mercy." And in the village of Umo, where a woman's worth had once been measured by the cry of a child, Agatha finally understood that the truest blessing is not what we take, but what we are given when we've learned to let go.